when you talk about plants for spirituality, it's mired with a lot of symbolism, lot of religion, lot of mythology, lot of superstition in many ways as well.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of the other plants. I
Yeah.
mean, in India, trees are worshipped either ways.
Yeah.
Where even before it becomes a seed and a fruit, they are worshipped. So yeah.
No, but that is why I find this very relevant, because see, in India what has happened is we have transported a lot of our sacred stuff to like photos and to mythology. If Rudraksha is sacred for us, I completely agree with you. We should have the plant somewhere. We should have actual interaction with it, because it is very important that if it is sacred, we should know more about it. We should understand it, instead of just transporting it and saying, photo me, I will keep doing this, but I don't know being about it. I don't even know A about it, no B about it. Like, so I think that's really, really important.
That traverses the people from the journey of fascination, which is sometimes blind as well, right? When you're fascinated by something, you don't know much about it, and then it becomes a possibility when you start knowing things. Then it becomes a reality when you start doing things on your own and things like that. And that is why I encouraged you, go order it right away. Even if it is half a foot plant, put it in a pot, it will grow until 3-4 feet, and then will be your problem of transplanting it somewhere. And when you come to Bangalore next, bring it with you. You can put it next to the Rudraksh plant. I have it on my own farm. Okay. So then I'll name it. I'll put a nameplate on it also saying Priyanka. and all the seeds from there will go to
of my plant.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so hey Sandeep, great to have you here on our YouTube channel. And for the viewers, let me introduce Sandeep. Sandeep is my Twitter friend. Basically, we followed each other for a long while on Twitter. And I think a couple of times it came up in the conversation that he is raising a Rudraksha tree in his farm. And that was very interesting for me. But earlier, I didn't know what to do much about it, because first of all, I wasn't thinking of planting a Rudraksha tree, and it's just I didn't have like a platform like this YouTube channel. And now I thought, definitely, because this channel is there, let's get him on board and let's discuss, like, can we also plant a Rudraksha tree in our backyard, or maybe even in our house? I don't know what's possible. So let's discuss with Sandeep. So Sandeep, great to have you here, first of all. And just tell us a little bit about yourself. No, I think you are a Bangalore urban city person. How did farming happen? How do you have a farm? And then we can just go to how the Rudraksha happened. So yeah.
Yes, Priyanka. Yes, as you kind of introduced, from Twitter friend to Zoom friend now. So yeah, that's probably a promotion. And hi everyone, to the viewers as well. Look, it is pretty much the story of starting with a farm and farming is kind of a deep-rooted, long-held wish. But I've been doing this only for last 5-6 years, and 5-6 years in the timeline of agriculture is not long, to be very honest. I mean, to do something like this, it's a few decades, if not ideally a lifetime of commitment at least. And when I started, and I still maintain that this is a commitment for a lifetime for me. I think this is a passion which will keep on. I've had to cut on so many other things just to keep this passion burning. So yeah, it kind of started again. The seeds of it probably lies all the way until childhood. I've had access to farms from some relatives, etc., having them and spending some school vacations, etc., and fairly good access to farms I've had. It's not like I've been drained of it, or I've been thirsted of it for all this while, so I wanted to do this, but I've had it. But very conventional way of thinking about a farm, right? Like as from childhood, I've always seen people thinking about this as as an asset, as a property, and you kind of grow one thing, monoculture of crops, and things like that. So but more into the adulthood is when you start forming thoughts for yourself rather than just absorbing what is happening and being fascinated by it. So that is where the fascination kind of turned into possibility and what you could do. And I had to take some steps there as well. I lived for good part before I bought the farm and actually moved back here. I spent a good part of the last decade or so, or half the decade or so, in London. Um, so there I started actually volunteering with a farm. There they have some urban farms and things like that, but very different. I mean, as you can imagine, the Western farms are all animal-based farms. There's hardly, crop cultivation. I mean, there is just for the, sake of it, just like how in India, cow is an ancillary while your crop cultivation is the main thing, right? So yeah, it's the reverse over there. So I tended to everything from sheep to goat to turkeys to ducks to even ponies and donkeys. That is what a Western farm usually contains. So that was actually a little bit of a hands-on uh, adulthood experience with the farm, doing things on your own and things like that. And I was also a volunteer at WOOF. I'm not sure if you know of WOOF. WOOF,
I know
you
of
can
WOOF,
look them
but you
up.
can tell us for the readers.
Yeah, so WOOF is WWOOF, as it is kind of spelled, stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. Since I was a volunteer, wherever I traveled, I have a day job. I then also had a day job. I have a day job now. In between for a while, I didn't. My day job kind of made me travel for business. And among those business, the things that I started bringing back from places translated from fridge magnets and t-shirts to seeds and bulbs. And my suitcase used to be full of trash as and when I started volunteering with these woof farms and visiting these places, etc. And it still continues to be so that kind of gave you a little bit of very, very real picture, and not just a fleeting visit, or just somebody else's thing you're just being there to see. So that triggered, again, as I said, fascination to possibility to what then can be a reality. So I actually quit my job in London, moved back, didn't take up a day job for a couple of years. This is between 2015 and 2017. We didn't, this is the farm that I have is not a hereditary property or running through the, generations. I actually bought it in 2015, just before I moved back. It helps that my family is from here, so there's a little bit of advantage in knowing the places and knowing the people and things like that. 2015 is when we really started calling that place as a farm of our own. When we started, it was, I can show you pictures later. There was not a farm. It was like a barren patch of land with rocks and soils. People around probably even mocked us for, paying the price that we did for that piece of land. But I also wanted that kind. I mean, because I was not looking at this as a commercial thing, I was not looking at land appreciation cost and all of that. For me, it was, doing it from the scratch. And the same people who probably, saw that patch of land before we bought it or just after we bought it, if they visit that farm now, they wouldn't recognize what it is, what it has become, etc. So yeah, that's the toil of farming from the last 5-6 years or so. And as I said, again, it has few decades of fleeting interest, but it's largely the last decade which has turned into, from fascination to possibility to reality. And what keep telling everyone and keep telling myself, this is going to go on for a few decades, if not a lifetime at least. So yeah, that's my kind of a journey into, farming, at least at this moment.
Great. No, I completely agree the decade part, because I think in agroforestry they do look at a decade for the trees to grow. So yours is what? Is it like an agroforestry farm, or are you also doing crop cultivation, or what kind of stuff?
It's a mixed cropping farm. So there's an interesting concept that we kind of follow. I can even send you the just like how you have floor maps for houses and buildings. I actually have a floor map for my farm. So it's multi-cropping in a way of, it incorporates principles from various schools of farming. One part of that is agroforestry, but my interest is in crop cultivation. So I've had to make sure that there is enough open spaces for me. I mean, I cultivate your short term, medium term, long term, everything,
Okay.
and yielding crops too. So whole of my periphery is largely non-yielding agroforestry method, while the next circle that you have, so I basically have two peripheral circles. Next circle that you have is usually the boundary and windbreaking forestry that you have, and some of them are also fruiting. It helps to have fruiting in the periphery because it kind of attracts birds, etc., which then help with your insect management, pest management. I've kind of borrowed a bunch of principles, and it's very difficult to
And
define
experimenting, I think
put
that's
it into one
amazing.
category.
Yeah. So how did Rudraksh happen? Coming to the topic, I could actually keep talking about agroforestry also, because as I told you, I have met some agroforestry farmers and I volunteered some on that thing. But let's go to Rudraksh because that's what the video is about. So how did Rudraksh happen?
Yeah, curiosity kills the cat. I mean, I can tell you, Rudraksh is one example. Probably in the later half, we'll cover some, various others which are very, very rare to find. So when it
Okay.
started out, I remember it actually started out. I mean, it's not like, if you're living in India, Rudraksh beads and Rudraksh mala is not a new concept or a
No,
unseen thing for, anyone. But having said that, I had never seen a Rudraksh tree. I'm sure
it's
that
true.
is
Even I have
true for
never
a lot
seen
of
it. That
people.
is why.
Exactly. Right?
In fact,
Yeah,
you know what
probably that is why
happened?
the fascination.
We had gone to the north
Yeah.
in one of these, I don't know, it was this big Tirthasthal where we had gone, and me and my mom were just walking in the market, and someone just, the driver or someone said, "Wahan pe Rudraksh jhad hai." They were like, "There's a Rudraksh tree there," and we were so excited, and we just went there, and it was like late evening, so that place was almost closing, and unfortunately, nobody was there to show us which tree was Rudraksh tree. So we just stood there
Yeah.
and looked at all the trees. We were so excited, but we couldn't see it.
Yeah, so that is how it was. That is how it was for a long period of time. Actually, I'll tell you to the timeline as well. But hopefully, during this particular call, you'll realize that it is fascination when you have less access, right? Just like how my starting farming journey was also
Yeah.
fascination to possibility to reality. You will hopefully realize that through this conversation that it is not a rocket science as well. They're growing
Okay.
Rudraksh parts of it. But initiating into Rudraksh, how it happened was I had never seen it. I had known enough about it. I've been a quizzer, so there is a lot of quizzical, very curious, mythological, mystery about the whole thing as well, right? So you kind of have that angle more. And then I remember 2017, we visited Rishikesh, me and my wife. We spent some time there. We went to Beatles Ashram. Have you been to Rishikesh and
No,
Beatles
I've
Ashram?
heard of it.
Yeah, so it's a rundown place. Not many people nowadays probably visit because it is not very well kept and all of that. It has become like a jungle, and probably that adds to the beauty of that space. Actually, I mean, when I travel, I do kind of find those places fascinating. So we went there, and that is where I found Rudraksh tree for the first time. A wild
Oh,
one, that too, right? It's not a cultivated one; it's a wild one. So inside Beatles Ashram, with roots, some in the ground, some over some constructed cave,
okay.
is where I found my first Rudraksh tree. So I was fascinated. Obviously, there were some Rudraksh, fruits which had fallen all over that particular tree. So I picked as much up as I could and fit into my, pockets. I filled mine up. Not just that. I mean, I picked actually a lot of seeds from them. When I do this, as I said to you, I pick up randomly everything. And not just that, I still remember one of the other things which was a lot more relevant and caught my attention in that forest of Rishikesh is wild kadhi patta. Okay,
Oh,
so what we grow at home and all is one type of kadhi patta. The kadhi patta that you will find there in most other forests, actually I read about it after and realized there's actually a wilder variety of the same kadhi patta which is a lot more stronger as well. I mean, like proper curry flavor.
is this
So, and that
wild curry patta, wild neem? They call something wild neem, which is what is
nahi, nahi,
used in
nahi,
Lavanya
kadhi patta,
Kashayam.
kadhi patta.
Curry patta.
Yeah, proper kadhi patta, not wild neem. So if you taste the leaves, it tastes kadhi patta, but a lot more stronger. So
Stronger.
it's also a little more bitter because of
Yeah.
the same stronger pungent kind of a flavor. That is probably why it is wild. but it's all over that. Like, every foot that you place, you will land onto a kadipata small sapling. And we also went there when it was still sprouting and things like that. So I I actually plucked some wild kadipata small saplings, like a inch, 2 inch long saplings, and put it into my pocket again. So I keep doing this. So I came back, actually tried sprouting a lot of them. I have wild kadipata from Rishikesh, but the Rudraksha fruits, they didn't survive. I planted them, waited for them to germinate. They didn't germinate. So I was like, okay. I mean, I've had lots of germination failures, and only one out of 100 really germinate if you pluck seeds, and that's the way kind of botany and nature works. So yeah, since that didn't work, I started looking out, and this is 2017, 4-5 years ago. The plant e-commerce wasn't still as prevalent, by the way. I mean,
Right.
right
Yeah,
now,
it
if you go to
wasn't.
Amazon, you can order any and every plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back in the day, it was not the case. You really had to search, and everything which was rare was out of stock at most times, etc. But I finally find, I think one of those nurserylive.com or something like that had just launched, and that is where I found I paid some good hefty 650 rupees or something for the Rudraksh, sapling. It came in like some half a feet, sapling. That is what I, got. I think this was towards May, June of 2017 or something. Kept in my balcony. My open terrace here at home in Bangalore is actually place where I germinate everything, where I keep all the younger saplings before they become old enough for me to kind of transfer it onto the farm. So even right now, my open terrace is full of things which are getting ready for monsoon season. April, May, when it starts raining is when everything gets transplanted. So kept it here for some time, and once it became ready is when it went onto the farm. So yeah, it's about a 4-year-old.
So is there something we are supposed to see in the sapling? Like this, though you ordered it online and you got a good sapling, but if someone is going offline to some nursery, I'm not looking at someone ripping us off. I'm saying, how do we know it's healthy?
Yeah, so healthy plants are healthy if they're in good compact soils and the sprouts according to seasons are going. So you also have to remember, like, and this is not applicable for every plant to plant the same way, right? Uh, like Rudraksh is a deciduous kind of a regional plant. That is why you associate with either rainforest or Himalayan range, and you will actually see that it shreds a lot of its leaves. जब autumn winter time पे it shreds a lot of its leaves. And also one of the things you will find with Rudraksh is that the color changes. That is why
Wow.
you see this. Yeah, so I'll actually show you photos as well.
Hmm.
The color goes from green in spring and summer to kind of yellowish, brownish, pinkish, and even bright reddish.
Oh.
Okay, so I have on my plant, leaves which are bright red. So you can recognize that even if it is a young plant, it will still do that, by the way. That is how you kind of recognize. And that differs from each plant to plant. Okay, and plant species to plant species. In Rudraksh, that is how you kind of recognize. Also, some things to kind of recognize is you can scratch around the root of the plant and see what's the seed quality like, or where the roots are being spread. You can also see whether it is a sometimes, because plant vegetation can happen either from seeds or can happen even from grafts, and just normal vegetation, which is cut the branch and stick it into the soil and still grow, right? So you will be able to recognize, but that differs from plant species to plant species. In Rudraksh, it is always grown from seeds, although it is very difficult to germinate, as I've discovered myself, and I've also heard from people who have tried to germinate. It's very, very difficult, because apparently Rudraksh beads are not the seeds.
Oh.
The beads that we use are beads. Inside the beads, there are supposed to be tinier seeds.
Oh.
And that is probably what, kind of
Germinate.
sprouts and germinates. yeah, that is what I learned after I failed at germinating. But I'll still continue to, by the way. I mean, this is the first yield that I'm getting on my farm. So I will try to germinate a few, every year.
Right.
Hopefully, even have a nursery kinds if you guys want to kind of, borrow from me. So yeah, I will continue to do that. But these are ways to kind of identify what plant you are getting, what its age could be, has it gone through one winter or not, like is it doing the same things it is supposed to do during a summer, during a winter, also grafting, sometimes, I mean, again, I'm going a little generic rather than Rudraksh. Grafting means basically you have a root stock, which is the bottom half of the plant, and then you have the parental stock which goes on top of the root stock. So if you take the mature plant and graft it onto the rootstock, it'll fruit and flower quicker, because that is what at the end of the day is branching out. Okay, so the mature plant on top is what is branching out. So if it is a grafted plant, you can see there's a cut at the stem more closer to the ground. So these are ways to kind of identify how the plant is kind of germinated, how it is growing, etc. But over and beyond, be ready for things to kind of go either ways. I mean, I've had so many germination failures. I've had so many plants which have come germinated but still fail when you transplant, or even when you're just waiting for it to grow to big enough to be transplanted.
But
So
this might happen to
it's
saplings
difficult to.
also. Like you have a sapling already with you now. It could go either way even now.
Sorry, if I have a sapling now, what will happen?
Your Rudraksh sapling right now, has it grown enough to be that you are sure it will now grow bigger, or will it now also anything can happen?
No. At 4 years, it is already 15 feet high, by the way. It's a tree now.
Oh,
It's not a plant anymore. It's not a sapling anymore. It's a tree. It's a
oh
yielding
wow.
tree. Yeah. So, and Rudraksh grows like it's a proper tree. I mean, goes up to 40, 50 feet and all that. So, what mine is at 4 years, it's probably a teenager.
Hmm.
In
So,
3 years,
how
in plant
small was
years,
it when you got it, and in 4 years, how much did it grow?
yeah, it was half a feet when I got it, and it's
Oh
15
wow,
feet right
that's
now.
really a
So
lot.
it has grown
That's
30
good.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, like any other growth territory, right? Like in your first few years is where it grows the quickest. Look, if the maximum it grows is 40, 50 feet, it has already grown 15 feet. So it'll only grow 3 times more in its whole lifetime, probably from now.
Yeah.
But in the last 4 years, it has already grown 30 times.
But that's in height. It'll obviously grow stronger, branches, all that stuff. So in that sense, it'll be more.
Yeah, those are all dependent on everything else, right?
Yeah.
Like, so one of the things you'll actually realize, I mean, I think you will also, if not in a sapling, identifying a healthy tree. Again, you will see for all the signs that I told you, which is shredding of leaves, and just the quality of leaves. Does it have much holes and insects or anything?
Hmm.
Because it is evergreen forest species, and also grown in slopes. It's actually grown in slopes. So best actually is to grow it even on a farm or anywhere else near the slope. It has kind of a buttress. After it grows, into a fairly adult tree, the roots kind of come up the ground a little bit. So you will see some of the trees which have like weird
Yeah.
kind of a roots, right? Like arms stretching out or things like that. So it also happens with Rudraksh tree
Okay.
and things like that. And it's a quite tough tree, by the way. I mean, it's a tough tree. So it's that is, I mean, given the locations where it is usually found, it has all the resources to kind of penetrate and go through rocks and soils and everything else. So it's, if you give them similar kind of an ecosystem, it kind of thrives anywhere.
So what kind of ecosystem are we looking at? Like in terms of weather, what is the weather you're looking at? And also within India, what kind of areas would we consider?
Yeah. So look, because it is rare, people think and associate, Rudraksh with Himalayas, and they think, Haridwar, Rishikesh, Nepal जाएंगे तो मिलेगा और कहीं नहीं मिलेगा. It's actually not true. plants actually depend on, yes, there is a climatic part, there's also altitude part, right? And if you see places like Bangalore or even places like Coimbatore and all that are at a higher altitude even than Rishikesh and Haridwar. If you go and read up in Wikipedia what the altitude of Haridwar and Rishikesh is against what the altitude of Bangalore is, Bangalore is at a higher level compared to mean sea level than Haridwar and Rishikesh. So altitude kind of helps plants in a big way. But also you have to understand where it is growing and can you simulate those conditions, whether you are doing it artificially or nature itself is simulating that kind of environment somewhere else. So slopes, quite dense foliage around that particular tree, and also a mix of rocky, soily, kind of a mixture where the roots are going in. So that's the kind of ecosystem you will see. I mean, look, there is enough probably online, I don't even know. I mean, I probably haven't read too much or don't remember from the times, but this is how I tackle every plant, how I need to grow. And that is how I did with the Rudraksha as well. If you can simulate that elsewhere, you have higher probability of your germination, sapling and plant kind
but
of
what
becoming
about
a
rains
success.
and stuff? Like, isn't that a key component? Because if the rains are not matching, then every time there's a deluge, it'll die or something. If there's not enough rain, it'll...
Yeah, so yes, but again, those are controllable, right? Like especially in a farm, in an agricultural world, or even if you're growing next to your house, those are, if the rain doesn't happen, you can still give it water. Okay, so that is a little more controllable. Things which are not controllable are actually frost or too much of heat, sun. Okay, that is not controllable. Like it will not stand too much of frost. That is why actually Rudraksha also you will not find too high in the Himalayas.
Oh.
You will not
Haridwar,
find, because
Rishikesh are
it
not too
frosts.
high. They actually get very hot in the summer.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, actually, that's exactly the reason why they're found in the lower plains of Himalayas.
Right.
So as higher you go, there are only pines and some of the trees which will stand the frost. So you got to make sure it cannot stand frost. It can also not stand too high temperatures, not just lack of water. Look, there's difference between lack of water and hotness, right? Like, yes, sometimes in the regional ways, hot places don't get water. Like Rajasthan, Thar and Kutch, hot as well as lack of water. But in Chennai, it's hot, but it is not lack of water. So, those are things which you have to kind of consider. Very dry, hot climates are not something which is suitable for Rudraksh growing. But otherwise, you will be able to simulate those conditions. If you do the simulation of the other factors, I think Rudraksh, has a pretty fairly wide range of temperatures and, ecosystem it can grow into. Anywhere between, I think, and again, this is not scientific, but I can tell you by just where all I have seen Rudraksha, where all I've heard of Rudraksh growing, anywhere between 15-20 degrees Celsius to 35 degrees Celsius. That's a wide range where probably 80% of cities and places in India will fit in. Yes, there will be some which will lie outside of that, but considering that, if you can simulate the other conditions within these temperature zones, I think it is fairly growable.
Great, that's really great. So, in terms of space, do we need to do a farm? Can I do it in my housing complex garden?
Yeah, that's a little complex one. Look, there are two things which you have to keep in mind. One, it requires dense foliage around itself. So it needs to be around a lot more other trees. So there has to be a play of other foliage around the leaves, the light kind of having direct sunlight for some time as well as shade for some time, and foliage on at the root also, like leaves falling, which is a typical forest scenario, right? That's a best case ecosystem for a Rudraksh to grow. That is one thing to kind of consider. Second thing is the roots, which I said, right? Like it has buttress roots over a period of time, so it kind of grows up. That is because it has so deep rooted and there's a dense thick roots. So so what these 2 points means is that The second point means you cannot have it next to a building, a constructed building. Each one will kind of affect the other one. Yeah. And once it grows, the tree will penetrate, foundations and buildings as well. You've seen roots kind of going into walls and things like that. So that's a danger.
There was this huge tree in one of my buildings nearby, and it ate through the entire wall. And then one rainy season, the tree fell and it took the wall with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. And that could very well happen with Rudraksha as
so we
well.
need a larger space. If the roots kind of go far, they are allowed to go. I mean, we should have that large garden.
Yeah, you can probably, if you go few, say 3 meters away, like I'm just gonna make a good guess at it. 3 meters away is a safe enough distance. But at this point, that's the second point taken care of. Now you also got to have the other pieces, right? You've got to have some dense foliage around it. It needs to be, cannot be in an open space, ek akela, Rudraksha tree. That is not an ideal condition for a Rudraksha tree. Given those things, if somebody has, like, I'll tell you, if you want to grow it in your home, an ideal home where Rudraksha can be grown is where you have a good backyard, right? Like, for example, maybe not in a, compound wall with a 2 feet only distance, or in an apartment with like too many constructed pieces around, but in a independent home with a backyard, the edges where you usually will plant a bunch of trees. One of the trees, interspersed between a bamboo and a mango and a chiku or things like that, or a coconut can be, a Rudraksha, and it will, grow equally well. I don't see any reason why it cannot grow in such kind of a, ecosystem. So that probably would be my input. But yeah, I mean, both those points which I mentioned of the roots as well as the foliage is easily achievable on a farm-like scenario.
The reason I was wondering about growing in the house is because I know it will not be the usual growth at all what you were saying, but there was this one person, because I had gone on a sapling drive once, and I had met this lady who was actually growing neem saplings in pots. And what she did was, she said that it, of course, in the pot, it will not grow as a normal tree, but you could keep pruning it and you could keep it a tiny tree, maybe something like a bonsai, like a smallish tree. Could we do something like that for the Rudraksha?
Look, neem is a lot more easier growing tree. Let me put it, like it's like neem, like if you put 10 seeds of neem, 6 will germinate without too much of failure. If you put 10, you'll ideally not even get one Rudraksha germinating. You'll have to put 100 to get one Rudraksha germinating. So that's the beginning. Okay. So I wouldn't bet on Rudraksha kind of growing that way on a pot, but at the same point of time, look, it could happen. I'm not going to say that it is never going to be impossible. I'm going to be experimenting with these things as well. Look, all of them will start like that, but I don't think they'll last long, or they'll fruit and give you, Rudraksha fruits in a pot. That probably is a little more difficult to achieve than just saplings. Saplings all grow in a pot only. I mean, at the end of the day, it has to be in a controlled environment. So people grow saplings in a pot and then only transplant. But ideally, grow it in a pot till the time it can really survive. Look, for also reason what I said about buttress roots, right? Pot, if you grow it in pot, like it'll completely uproot itself.
Yeah.
Over a period of time. So given all of that, grow it in a pot till it kind of grows up to maybe 4 feet, 5 feet. But after that, for it to even achieve maturity, it needs to go into the ground. While things like neem and all, I can tell you, they will grow. I mean, they will also not grow to the same extent as they might be in the ground, but they will grow a little more easily, and they're a little more hardy than probably a Rudraksha.
So great. So that's really useful. So once you have this grown Rudraksha tree with you now, what has been your experience? Like, what are the kind of birds and all, the effect on, if at all any, on the soil and the environment and anything else?
Yeah, actually, give me a minute. I have a Rudraksha fruit that I've got. I'll get it for you.
So great. Since he's showing a fruit, I'll show you my mala. I've been wearing this Rudraksha mala since 2006, 2007, I guess so. 2006, maybe 2007. So yeah, I got this from Isha Foundation, and yeah, I've been taking care of it for all these years. I even thread my own mala, and you know, there is some process. Like every time the mala breaks, I kind of put it in the ghee and milk to kind of keep it well, and then I thread it on my own. Yeah, I was telling them about my Rudraksh mala. Yeah, you can show us the Rudraksh fruit.
Yeah, so
Ah,
this here
hmm. Is it
is the
hard?
Rudraksh
It's
fruit.
looking hard.
It is quite hard. It is not a ripened one, by the way. It is
Oh,
a quite unripe, fruit, which I just got to show. I
nice.
remembered this weekend that you had asked for this, so I thought I'll show it to everyone. So this is how the fruits are on my plant today. Okay, and this is quite a big size. If you see this,
Yeah,
this is probably, if I show you next to
palm
my
size.
finger, yeah, and the fruit size is indicative of the bead size also, which will come out of this. So the malas that you probably are wearing, or most people wear, would be much more tinier as well. I mean, yes, people.
I just showed my mala. This is pretty tiny, but there are even more tinier than this seeds are there. The tinier
Yes.
the seeds, they are more expensive, just so everyone knows.
Yeah. So this now will ripen. Okay, will ripen further. Probably another 2 months, I would say. Okay, I also haven't seen it on my own plant. This is the first yield that we are getting. I haven't seen ripened fruit from my own plant yet, but I know that it takes anywhere between 6 to 8 months from the flowering stage to a fully ripening stage. Okay, so it's been about 5 months or so since the flowering started on the plant. So I'm guessing another 2 months or so is when it'll fully ripen. When this ripens, this actually becomes blue. Okay,
Wow.
so very fascinating. It becomes blue. So the fruits that I said I got from Rishikesh, I found them littered around on the Beatles Ashram, were blue. They almost look like blueberry, and one of the more common, westernized name for Rudraksha tree is actually blueberry tree.
What?
Okay, so
I never
all
knew.
these foreigners will refer to it as a blueberry tree. So yeah, so this becomes proper blue, and when it becomes blue, that is when it is fully ripened. Typically people don't really, I mean, maybe they do it when they're growing for commercial purpose and they really harvest it, but most other people I have seen who grow like one tree, two tree, let them all fall. Once it ripens, it falls automatically, then collect them. um, yeah, that is when you have a fruit. Then it's a whole process altogether from there to
Getting these beads.
making the beads, which is, by the
And
way, and one thing which I have to tell you also is that these usage things are like, it is in Hinduism and India largely, and now obviously everybody kind of,
yeah, because
you
of
know
yoga, westernization of yoga.
exactly, it kind of has bought into the idea of Rudraksh being sacred and spiritual, etc., right? But otherwise it was a wild plant. Rudraksh is a wild plant. It grows not only in India and Nepal, etc. It grows all the way in Australia, Hawaii, Indonesia. I mean, if we actually read, one of the largest exporters, mostly the beads that you are wearing are either from Nepal or from Indonesia.
Oh,
So
but
yeah, it
that's
is
not
not
surprising
necessary.
because Indonesia has a very strong Indic culture base. Like they have their Ramayana, they have their very Indian culture at their roots. So they probably consider Rudraksh sacred also. India is very typical
It
that
is
they've
not.
just, they consider it sacred, but they do nothing about it in a way. I mean, a lot of our things have crumbled.
Yeah, so culturally, yes, I do agree. Both, all of Southeast Asia, for that matter, have their own versions of Ramayana, and Hindu scriptures kind of borrowed into. Even if they're Buddhist
Even
nations,
Buddhist,
the
yes.
journey of
Yes.
Buddha so very mimics the journey of Rama in many cultures and countries, right?
So,
So from all that perspective, but for a Rudraksh, Indonesia is not because of cultural similarity, but Indonesia is also one of the oldest rainforest regions.
oh,
So that is why Rudraksh grows there. And same is the case with parts of Hawaii, parts of Australia. So the whole belt stretches from Himalayas, going down the rainforest region to Australia and ending at the western coast of US. I mean, or say Pacific Ocean, which is the Hawaii. So all these places it is still found. Not everything
But in
is used
Australia,
for making.
where is the rainforest? I thought it was a desert in the middle, and the side is it?
Yeah. So there are the South Australia, etc., has thick forests which are equally susceptible for the ecosystem that a
Rudraksha
Rudraksh
forest.
kind of a tree
Okay.
grows. I mean, I don't know personally. I mean, this is something which I've also realized after I started planting these things. Just as I said, out of curiosity. But yeah, all of this is the belt. So not every Rudraksh fruit turns into that Rudraksh bead, which goes for, a mala or a spiritual reasons only. It is a wild plant at the end of the day. How you use it is what kind of determines what you do with it over the period of time there.